Chapter 284. The Place of Fasting. Lin Chia followed the caregiver through the winding corridor and stopped in front of a transparent door several centimeters thick. The material of this door was unknown. Lin Chia walked to the side of the door, barely extending his mental energy outside his body, only to find that even the mortal realm could not penetrate this door. It was like a mental energy insulator, blocking all forms of psychic exploration. He saw the caregiver take out a work ID in front of the camera overhead, seemingly waiting for verification. The next moment, a deep male voice came from a tiny speaker. Employee number 39180, please respond to today's passphrase. What does the lamp bearer most want to eat today? Delicious taro mud bubble tea that makes you go meh. Passphrase correct, please proceed. The verification device next to the glass door lit up with a green light. With a soft sound, the transparent door that blocked mental energy slowly opened, revealing a large outdoor activity area behind it. Lin Chia. What kind of verification is this? From the metal cube to the entrance of the research institute, it was a short 5-minute walk. Yet there were 9 checkpoints along the way, including but not limited to passwords, fingerprints, iris scans, voice recognition, and work ID verification. These were not difficult for Lin Chia, but the final passphrase checkpoint truly shocked him. What era is this? There are still people using such primitive verification methods? And a passphrase like, delicious taro mud bubble tea that makes you go meh. Is that something a normal human could come up with? The caregiver turned sideways, standing behind the transparent door and gesturing for him to enter. Lin Chia stepped forward, somewhat puzzled, and asked, Am I going in alone? Aren't you going to watch me? I am a caregiver at the Sunshine Mental Hospital and cannot leave this place at will. There are cameras everywhere in this activity area, and someone will always be monitoring and recording your actions and words. Moreover, Dr. Lee has mentioned that the best observation environment is when the patients are alone, the caregiver explained to Lin Chia. However, you must return here before 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or someone will come to bring you back. If you want to end your observation period quickly, you must be punctual. Lin Chia nodded, took a step outside, and then seemed to remember something, turning back to ask. This is the activity area shared with those prisoners, right? How is the security here? The caregiver hesitated for a moment but kindly reminded him, it's not very good. The people held in the fasting facility are all violent superhumans, and they can roughly be divided into 3 categories. One category consists of those who became evil after acquiring forbidden realms and were brought here as vicious criminals. This group is the largest and loves to cause trouble. Another category includes terrorists like believers, who once acted in organized groups. Although they cannot use forbidden realms here, they are all professionally trained and can kill a group of people even when unarmed. The last category consists of night watchmen who were imprisoned here for various reasons. Although they may not be good people, they were all once soldiers and generally keep a low profile, not intentionally causing trouble. However, this group is not numerous. In summary, the vast majority of those locked up here are lawless individuals capable of anything. Although you are not a prisoner but a patient, they generally won't provoke you, but it's still better to keep your distance from them. After hearing the caregiver's reminder, Lin Chia nodded thoughtfully and then stepped into the activity area. The activity area of this prison was larger than Lin Chia had imagined. Towering steel walls surrounded it, enclosing an area the size of 2 gymnasiums. Every 100 meters atop the steel walls stood a dark watchtower, with the faint reflection of a sniper scope shining through. Lin Chia approached the wall, extending a finger to gently touch its surface. It felt smooth and cold, incredibly hard. Just based on the hardness and thickness of these walls, even a cannon would struggle to make a dent. He looked up and saw that about 20 meters above the ground, there were electric fences and barbed wire, and the wall itself was approximately 50 meters high. Without using forbidden realms, it was impossible for anyone to climb over this wall, especially with watchtowers surrounding it. If someone made a move, the sniper's bullets would teach them a lesson. Lin Chia walked forward along the path. On both sides of the basketball court, several muscular men were playing basketball, their movements brutal and violent, almost devoid of technique, but from their ferocious smiles, it was clear they were enjoying themselves. Not far from the basketball court was an old rubber track, and beside it was an area with fixed equipment, including pull-up bars, parallel bars, and spinning discs. A large group of prisoners gathered there, laughing heartily about something. As soon as Lin Chia entered their line of sight, all the prisoners stopped their actions, their gazes fixed on Lin Chia, occasionally whispering to their companions. Amidst the many black and white striped prison uniforms, Lin Chia, dressed in a blue and white patient outfit, stood out like a star in the night. "Boss Han, how did another patient pop up?" A scar-faced man leaned toward a burly figure beside him, puzzled. Boss Han's gaze was fixed on Lin Chia, a strange light flickering in his eyes. "Another one has come, but this one looks quite good, I must say." The scar-faced man raised an eyebrow, a lewd smile creeping onto his face. "Boss Han, a handsome young man like this is rare in this fasting facility. We should act first to avoid letting other bastards get to him first. Don't rush." Boss Han narrowed his eyes into a slit. "These patients are all freaks. Let others test the waters first and see where he comes from. Just a mental patient, what's there to be afraid of?" The scar-faced man shrugged, speaking nonchalantly. "Look at that old dog Wu. He's just a crazy waste who can't even use forbidden realms. What do we have to fear?" Boss Han shot him a glance and snorted coldly. "Have you forgotten how fourth brother died a few years ago?" Hearing this, the scar-faced man froze, his expression shifting. "Back in the day, my fourth brother was quite a big shot in this fasting facility. Who would have thought he would be stabbed to death by that little madman named Chow with a dinner knife?" Boss Han turned around, his eyes fixed on the hoop, and forcefully threw the basketball. Bang! With a loud crash, the glass behind the hoop shattered from the impact of the basketball, shards of glass clattering to the ground, glinting ominously. "If he really is a soft target, he will eventually become my plaything." A cold smile crept across Boss Han's lips. Chapter 285. Prisoner. Lin Chia walked over to the fixed equipment area and casually found the most peripheral pull-up bar. After warming up his limbs, he began doing pull-ups. The year of slumber had left his body incredibly weak, with strength at less than a third of what it used to be. To execute his escape plan, he needed to restore his body to its optimal condition. As he worked out, the surrounding prisoners stole glances at him. When they saw him manage only 30 pull-ups in one go, disdain flickered in their eyes. Most of them were trained individuals, and under normal circumstances, doing 30 pull-ups without using any enhancements was considered a very low standard. After completing 8 sets of pull-ups, Lin Chia sat down to rest, sweat dripping from his cheeks onto the ground, his breathing somewhat heavy. At that moment, 3 burly figures stood in front of him. Lin Chia looked up to see that the leader was nearly 2 meters tall, with a robust build. His thick arms were tattooed with images of a green-faced fanged demon, and his fierce little eyes were fixed on Lin Chia, sneering. "Hey, new guy," the buzz-cut subordinate behind the burly man piped up sharply. Lin Chia glanced at him indifferently. "What do you want?" "Oh, look at you acting all tough." The buzz-cut guy chuckled, pointing at the burly man in front of him. "Let me introduce you. This is Brother Ameng. He's the boss of our Black Dragon gang. From now on you're under Brother Ameng. Why don't you greet him?" "Black Dragon gang?" Lin Chia's gaze swept over the 3 of them and he replied coolly, "You mean just the 3 of you?" Brother Ameng's expression stiffened. He bent down and grabbed Lin Chia by the collar, staring into his eyes with malice. "Kid, I advise you to be sensible. With your little frame, you're not even worth my time." Brother Ameng pushed Lin Chia hard, trying to knock him down, but Lin Chia merely stepped back lightly, regaining his balance. His eyes narrowed slightly and a faint killing intent radiated from him. Seeing that his move hadn't taught Lin Chia a lesson, Brother Ameng stepped forward, his right fist clenched and swung it fiercely at Lin Chia's side, the powerful punch creating a whistling wind. Lin Chia seemed to have completely anticipated Brother Ameng's action, effortlessly stepping back half a step. Brother Ameng's fist brushed past the tip of his nose, the wind from the punch ruffling a few strands of Lin Chia's black hair, revealing his deep-set eyes. Before Brother Ameng could react, Lin Chia swiftly stepped forward, pushing aside Brother Ameng's arm while simultaneously delivering a powerful elbow strike to his jaw. Bang! With a crisp sound, Brother Ameng fell backward, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. The 2 subordinates beside him were taken aback, about to rush in to help, but Lin Chia spun around and delivered a flying kick directly to the buzz-cut guy's neck, knocking him to the ground. At the same time he grabbed the other man's wrist and twisted it down sharply. A clear sound of bones breaking accompanied by a painful scream echoed in the air. Lin Chia casually tossed him aside, dusted off his loose hospital gown, and walked over to where Brother Ameng lay on the ground, placing a foot on his chest. Brother Ameng, who had initially wanted to get up and fight, was pushed back down by this foot. Before he could make a move, Lin Chia delivered a heavy punch to his right eye. Lin Chia expressionlessly withdrew his fist, and Brother Ameng's eye socket was already bruised. "So, Brother Ameng, you think you're tough?" Lin Chia said, his foot still on Brother Ameng. "Who sent you to test me?" Brother Ameng, humiliated and furious, his face flushed red, shouted, "Damn it, you sickly brat, don't act all tough here. I was just..." Bang! Another dull thud rang out, and Brother Ameng's left eye socket also turned purple, his already small eyes squinting into a slit, unable to open. He covered his eyes in pain and began to wail. "Who sent you to test me?" Lin Chia's calm voice rang out again. Brother Ameng turned his head away, avoiding Lin Chia's gaze, gritting his teeth and remaining silent. Lin Chia's eyes narrowed slightly as he extended his right hand, curling his index finger and pressing it against Brother Ameng's throat, gradually applying pressure. Brother Ameng let out a pained groan, his neck turning increasingly red. He could clearly feel that if Lin Chia applied more force, his Adam's apple would be crushed. Yes, it was Han. It was me. At that moment, a voice drifted over from the basketball court. A dozen fierce-looking prisoners slowly approached, led by a grim-faced Han, whose shadowy eyes were fixed on Lin Chia. Not only them, but at Han's words, more than half of the prisoners originally gathered around the fixed equipment area stood up, menacingly surrounding Lin Chia. In just a moment, several circles of people had surrounded Lin Chia, their burly bodies forming a heavy wall that trapped him inside. Nearly 60% of the prisoners in the activity area were here, and all of them were part of Han's faction. Lin Chia relaxed his finger from Brother Ameng's throat and slowly stood up straight, gazing at the figure in the lead, his eyes filled with calm. "It was me who sent him. Do you have any objections?" Han said coldly. Lin Chia's gaze swept around. "It seems you are the real boss here, but your influence is even less than I expected." Han glanced at the few people standing motionless by the equipment, a hint of coldness flashing in his eyes. He turned back to Lin Chia and sneered, "Kid, don't try to provoke a fight. I admit you can fight. Your moves are simple yet fierce, swift as the wind. You're a night watchman, right?" Lin Chia raised his eyebrows slightly. "There aren't many night watchmen here, but there are some who are better than you. But do you know why I'm the boss here?" Han said, a sinister smile creeping across his face as he spoke slowly. "Because I'm stronger than them." He stepped closer to Lin Chia, his gaze fierce as he locked eyes with him, like a wolf stalking its prey, slowly revealing his fangs. "Here, talent and enhancements mean nothing. Whoever has greater strength and more numbers is the true strong one. With just you alone, no matter how good you are, can you defeat these 40-odd people?" Chapter 286. Another patient. As soon as Han Laoda's words fell, the surroundings fell into a dead silence. Lin Chia quietly watched him, a faint golden glow appearing between his lowered hands. Who said he was alone? A deep voice came from a distance and everyone turned to look, only to see two men in prison uniforms standing nearby, speaking calmly. Seeing them, Han Laoda frowned slightly and coldly said, "Are you two going to meddle as well?" "He is one of our night watchmen, Han Jinlong." "You should back off," one of the men said in a low voice. "Heh." Han Laoda sneered, "You three together think you have a chance? We'll find out if we try." The surrounding prisoners exchanged glances, hesitation evident in their eyes. There weren't many night watchmen brought into this fasting place, but they all shared a common trait. They were tough fighters. One night watchman could easily take down 7 or 8 other prisoners, all of whom were hard nuts to crack. This was why Han Laoda and his group had been hesitant to take action against these few night watchmen. If a fight broke out, even if Han Laoda's side could win, they would suffer heavy losses. Now with Lin Chia added to the mix, the situation became even more troublesome. Han Laoda seemed to be stirred by anger, his gaze fixed on the two men, and the atmosphere around them instantly became tense. At that moment, several armed guards rushed over from a distance. Seeing a large crowd gathered ahead, they fired a shot into the sky. Bang! As the gunshot rang out, the prisoners quickly scattered. Han Laoda's face darkened and he shot Lin Chia a fierce glare before stepping back. The guards approached the fallen Meng and seeing the dark bruises on his face, looked up at the crowd. Who did this? I did, Lin Chia volunteered. Seeing Lin Chia in a patient outfit, the guard's eyes widened in surprise. He glanced at the unconscious Meng and hesitated. Logically, if a fight broke out in the prison, all participants should be punished. But the one who struck was not a prisoner but a patient who had escaped from the nearby mental hospital. How could anyone clarify the situation when a mental patient was involved? After pondering for a moment, he pulled out a walkie-talkie and consulted his superiors, then turned to Lin Chia and said, "Someone from the hospital will come to pick you up shortly. Don't run around here and don't hit anyone next time." After speaking, the guard gestured a few times to illustrate hitting someone, then repeatedly waved his hands, making an X in front of his chest. Lin Chia. He couldn't help but think that he was a mental patient, not an idiot. At that moment, Lin Chia clearly felt insulted regarding his intelligence. A few minutes later, several attendants from the hospital arrived to take Lin Chia away. Once Lin Chia left, Han Laoda's expression grew even darker. He glanced back at Meng who was being dragged away like a dead dog, spat on the ground and coldly said, "Find an opportunity to take care of that waste Lu Meng. Those who betray me will not have a good end. Didn't I tell you not to get too close to those prisoners? Why did you end up hitting someone?" The attendant who brought Lin Chia out couldn't help but ask. "I can't be blamed, they started it first," Lin Chia shrugged. "I was just acting in self-defense, not having a mental episode." "Whether you're having a mental episode or not is up to Dr. Li to decide," the attendant replied. "Why do you all trust that Dr. Li so much?" "Who is he?" Lin Chia asked in confusion. Dr. Li is the top psychiatrist in Daxia and also the psychological consultant for the Night Watchman's headquarters. All night watchmen or other forbidden area owners deemed to have mental issues are treated by him. He is considered the most authoritative figure in the field of psychiatry. Lin Chia nodded thoughtfully. Just as the two were talking, Lin Chia passed through the transparent door and returned to the building housing the Sunshine Mental Hospital. As soon as he stepped into the corridor, he encountered two people coming toward him. One was an attendant and the other was a man in a patient outfit just like Lin Chia. The man appeared somewhat disheveled, with hair that looked like a bird's nest. His hands were clasped together and hung in front of him, giving him a slightly hunched appearance. His eyes darted around as if he were thinking about something. As Lin Chia observed him, the man noticed Lin Chia as well, his eyes lighting up with a strange glimmer as he cheerfully waved at him. Lin Chia was taken aback and politely waved back. After they brushed past each other, the man followed the attendant through the transparent door and stepped outside. "Are there other patients here?" Lin Chia asked the attendant beside him in confusion. "Yes, he lives next door to you, just in another direction, which is why you didn't pass by him when you came out," the attendant nodded. "He arrived earlier than you, even before that boy named Chow left the hospital, and he is different from you." "Different? How so?" "He really has a mental illness and it's quite severe." "So, you think I don't have a mental illness?" Lin Chia's eyes lit up with joy. "Just compared to him you seem more like a normal person," the attendant shrugged. "All right. What's his background?" "Everyone here calls him Wu Laogo. As for his real name, very few people remember it. But I heard he was once a member of the medium team." "The special team numbered 002? Lin Chia's eyes widened in surprise. "How did he end up here?" "I don't know the specific details. After all, I'm just an attendant." The attendant led Lin Chia to the door of his metal room and opened it for him. "You hit someone today, so your outdoor time has to end here. I'll take you out again at the same time tomorrow." "Okay." Lin Chia entered the metal room, lay back on the bed and closed his eyes, his mind automatically recalling the various details he had recorded during this outing. If it weren't for Meng and his group causing trouble, he could have gathered more information about this place to find a way to escape. But with their interruption, today had to come to an end. Fortunately, he still had the opportunity to go out again. After all, this was the top prison in all of Daxia, and preparing to escape wouldn't be something that could be accomplished overnight. As Lin Chia pondered, he seemed to sense something and his consciousness quickly sank into the mental hospital in his mind. Dressed in a white coat, he had just entered the hospital when Li Yifei hurriedly approached him. "What's wrong? Why are you in such a hurry? Is something happening?" Lin Chia asked in confusion. Li Yifei looked around to ensure no one else was present, then leaned in close to Lin Chia's ear and whispered, "Chia, I need to tell you that Brocky has a problem." Chapter 287. The Mysterious Blocky. "What's his problem?" Lin Chia asked. He, Li Yifei stammered for a long time then waved his hand. "Forget it, just come with me to see for yourself." Lin Chia followed Li Yifei through the hospital and into an empty courtyard. It was now evening and under the pitch-black sky, the entire mental hospital was shrouded in darkness, with only a few rooms still lit. The two of them walked behind a large tree in the courtyard. Li Yifei pointed to a few nearby patient rooms and whispered, "Look over there." Lin Chia raised his eyes and saw that in the dimly lit two-story building, the first two rooms were completely dark, while a faint light was visible through the crack of the door of the third room. "That's Broggy's room," Lin Chia said. "Yes," Li Yifei nodded. "At this hour, Grandma Nix is usually asleep and Uncle Merlin has been focusing on his health lately, going to bed even earlier. So when I got up to use the bathroom just now and saw light coming from there, I was a bit curious and went to take a look." "What did you see?" Li Yifei pointed to the branches above them. "You'll know if you go up and take a look." Lin Chia rolled his eyes at Li Yifei, then nimbly leaped onto a branch. From their vantage point on the first floor, they could only see that the light was on in the patient room but not the specifics inside. As Lin Chia climbed higher, the scene inside the room came into full view. In the dimly lit room 3, the electric light was off, and only a white candle on the table emitted a faint glow. A man draped in white satin sat in front of the table, seemingly looking into a mirror. Seeing this, Lin Chia's brows furrowed slightly. Broggy was awake in the middle of the night looking into a mirror? Although with his looks, it wouldn't be too strange for him to admire himself at night, Lin Chia felt that something was off. After staring for a moment, a glimmer of realization appeared in Lin Chia's eyes. His posture. Broggy's sitting posture was too strange. His legs were slightly together, leaning to one side of the chair, the smooth satin half concealing his legs. He sat there quietly, not like a man but more like a graceful lady. Lin Chia couldn't help but recall how Broggy had behaved during the day. Although he was somewhat delicate in appearance, his demeanor was definitely not effeminate. He wouldn't sit like that. Could he have some hidden preference? Just as Lin Chia was pondering this, Broggy moved again. Sitting elegantly in the chair, he extended his pale, slender hands to open a small box beside the table. Inside the box seemed to be some red unknown liquid. He dipped his fingertips into the box and then lightly brushed them against his lips. His lips were as bright as fire. The dim candlelight flickered in the ancient bronze mirror, illuminating Broggy's stunningly enchanting face. He gently pressed his lips together, the vibrant lip color forming a slight curve, and a look of satisfaction appeared in his eyes. Lin Chia felt a chill run down his spine. That wasn't Broggy. That was definitely not Broggy. A man could not possibly make such a delicate and alluring expression. At least Broggy wouldn't. Lin Chia took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. If nothing unexpected happened, Broggy's condition was likely related to his current behavior. Could he be possessed by something unclean? Lin Chia had heard such rural ghost stories in his early years, where people possessed by spirits would do unimaginable things, collectively referred to as being haunted. But Broggy wasn't an ordinary person. Although his presence in mythology wasn't strong and his combat power wasn't high, he was still a deity, the offspring of the god King Odin. What could possibly possess him? If it wasn't possession, then how could he explain the scene before him? Sleepwalking? Lin Chia hesitated, wondering if he should directly approach Broggy and ask him what was going on. But if he was indeed sleepwalking, waking him abruptly might have the opposite effect. While Lin Chia was deep in thought, Broggy slowly stood up from the mirror, glanced at the outside sky, and a hint of disappointment crossed his eyes. He gently wiped his face and all the makeup vanished, returning to his original appearance. He shed the white satin and changed back into his usual clothes, quietly lying down on the bed and slowly closing his eyes. As if he had fallen asleep. Lin Chia jumped down from the branch, landing silently on the grass. Li Yifei leaned closer and whispered, "Did you see that?" "I saw." "Is he a pervert?" "Probably not." Lin Chia pondered for a moment. "I'm not sure about the specifics. I'll subtly ask him tomorrow morning and see how he reacts. Remember, don't be too direct or you might hurt his pride." Li Yifei nodded. "Got it." The next day. "Bragi, do you know about what happened last night when you dressed as a woman?" Bragi had just sleepily walked to the dining table when Li Yifei eagerly approached him and asked. "Pfft." Merlin, sitting nearby, nearly spat out the goji berry tea he was drinking. He struggled to swallow it down, pretending to cough a few times, his gaze occasionally darting toward Bragi, astonishment evident in his eyes. Nix, sitting opposite, also looked up, elegantly holding his coffee, watching Bragi with a half-smile. "Dressed as a woman?" Bragi was taken aback, asking in confusion, "What woman's clothing?" "You know, wearing white stockings, braiding your hair, putting on lipstick." Li Yifei asked, puzzled. "You really don't remember?" Merlin's astonishment deepened. Bragi shook his head. "I don't know what you're talking about. I slept very well last night. I'm a man. Why would I braid my hair or put on lipstick? By the way, what are these white stockings you mentioned?" Li Yifei scratched his head, carefully observing Bragi's expression, which didn't seem like he was lying. Just then Lin Chia walked in wearing a white lab coat. "Chia, Bragi doesn't remember dressing as a woman." "Lin Chia." Lin Chia's mouth twitched slightly. He shot a fierce glare at Li Yifei, cleared his throat a couple of times and turned to Bragi. "Do you really not remember anything from last night?" Bragi shook his head in confusion. "What happened last night?" "Nothing." Lin Chia shook his head, catching a glimpse of Li Yifei, who was eagerly about to say something and quickly covered his mouth. "Woo woo woo. You guys eat first, I'll take Li Yifei out for a walk." Lin Chia said with a smile, then dragged Li Yifei out of the activity room. Chapter 288, The New Prisoner. Lin Chia closed the door behind him and with Li Yifei, walked into the courtyard before releasing his grip on Li Yifei's mouth. "Chia, why didn't you let me speak?" Li Yifei couldn't help but ask. "Is this how you go about things?" Lin Chia sighed helplessly. "Braki's situation is more complicated than I imagined. I think the main issue lies with that female persona from last night. If I rashly tell Braki now, it might provoke his subconscious resistance." "Oh." Li Yifei nodded, somewhat understanding. "So what do we do next?" Lin Chia pondered for a moment. "Tonight I'll try to communicate with that female persona. We'll discuss the rest later. But before we confirm his condition, don't bring up last night's events with him again." "All right." In the penitentiary, the prison. Clang clang clang. In the narrow, dimly lit corridor, a boy dressed in black and white striped prison garb dragged heavy chains, walking barefoot and slowly. Behind him were 4 armed guards and in front was a man in a black trench coat. On either side of the corridor, dark metal bars separated one isolated cell after another. The prisoners inside stood up, carefully scrutinizing the newcomer who had just entered the prison. The boy's head hung low but then slightly lifted, his peripheral vision sweeping around, a faint gray light flashing in his eyes. Finally, the man in black at the front stopped. He looked down at the documents in his hand and coldly spoke. "Number 07293 in Qingyu, this is your cell." The guard behind him took out a key, unlocked the shackles on Qingyu's hands and feet, and gestured with his chin towards the cell ahead, urging him to hurry inside. Qingyu glanced at the cell and silently walked in. The guard closed the cell door behind him and followed the man in black as they walked away. He stood in the center of the cell, his gray eyes gradually scanning every inch of the space, like a statue standing there, motionless. "Hey kid." A sharp voice came from the opposite cell. "What did you do to end up here?" The gray in Qingyu's eyes faded as he turned to look at the one-eyed man in the opposite cell and slowly replied, "I stole something." "Stole something? Hey, it's rare to see someone locked up for that kind of thing." The one-eyed man scrutinized Qingyu's gentle face, a lewd expression gradually rising in his remaining eye. "Kid, I didn't expect you to look quite clean. Although you're not as good-looking as that sickly guy from yesterday, I like your kind of delicate little boys. From now on, stick with me, hee hee hee." Qingyu's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at the grinning one-eyed man, seemingly trying to see through him completely. After a moment he shook his head. "I'm not interested in the body of a waste." Hearing this, the one-eyed man's expression stiffened, anger flashing in his eyes as he sneered. Kid, it seems you really don't know how high the sky is. If you have the guts, just stay in your cell and don't come out. Otherwise. And Qingyu ignored the one-eyed man's threats and sat down in the corner, closing his eyes as if deep in thought. Time passed second by second, and a few hours later, a synchronized light sound echoed as all the cell doors opened simultaneously. Now is free activity time. Prisoners who need to move can leave in an orderly manner. The activity deadline is. A man's voice came from the speaker hanging in the room, echoing throughout the prison. Most prisoners opened their doors and walked out, lining up orderly under the supervision of several guards as they headed toward the prison exit. And Qingyu stood up from the corner, brushed off the dust on his clothes and walked out, joining the line of those leaving. At that moment, a familiar voice floated from behind him. Kid, you've got some guts. And Qingyu didn't need to turn around to know it was the one-eyed man from the opposite cell. He continued walking forward without pausing, as if he were completely unaware of his presence. As the line moved out of the cell area, they arrived at the outdoor activity area. Just as Qingyu was about to wander around and familiarize himself with the layout, a strong hand suddenly grabbed his collar from behind, while another arm hooked around his neck, dragging him in another direction. Let's go somewhere else, I'll teach you the rules. The one-eyed man's cold laughter came from behind. And Qingyu looked up at the sky, not resisting, only a look of helplessness appearing in his eyes. The one-eyed man dragged Qingyu into a cramped, filthy restroom, pushed him inside, locked the door behind him and pulled out some sticky, strange substances from his pocket, resembling rotten rice remnants mixed with dirt. He skillfully smeared it over the camera lens in the corner. And Qingyu stood to the side, patiently watching the one-eyed man and asked with some surprise, "Do you guys do this often?" The outdoor activity area is always monitored by snipers, and there are cameras and guards everywhere in the cells with no blind spots. In the entire penitentiary, the restroom has the least surveillance. As long as we cover the only camera in here, whatever happens will go unnoticed for a short time. After covering the camera lens, the one-eyed man leisurely began washing his hands. He glanced at Qingyu, a cold smile appearing on his lips. Many unfortunate guys have died here. I advise you to cooperate with me, otherwise, Qingyu pondered for a moment and replied, "If I don't cooperate, will you kill me?" The one-eyed man turned off the faucet, shaking the water off his hands as he approached Qingyu, speaking ominously, "Of course. I don't believe you." Qingyu shook his head. The one-eyed man's brow furrowed slightly. "If you kill me, how will you deal with my body? There's nowhere to hide a corpse here. Someone will find out sooner or later." Qingyu said calmly, "Kid, you're still too naive." The one-eyed man laughed at this question. "After killing you, I just need to chop you into pieces and flush you down the drain and no one will ever find out." The one-eyed man walked to the side and pulled a rope on the water tank. A massive rush of water surged down, sweeping all the waste into a large hole on the other side, disappearing without a trace. This hole is huge, bigger than a volleyball, and the dark, deep sewer leads who knows where. Qingyu gazed at the hole, deep in thought. Chapter 289, On Qingyu's Doubts. Why is the diameter of this sewer so much larger than normal? Qingyu asked, puzzled. The one-eyed man was taken aback, seemingly not expecting the boy to ask such a question. He couldn't help but respond harshly, "Kid, it seems you still don't understand the current situation. Since that's the case, I know you want me to cooperate with you, right?" Qingyu replied calmly. "Once you answer my question, I can cooperate with you however you want." Hearing this, the one-eyed man licked his lips and continued, "This prison is built on a small island which decades ago was actually a secret military base at sea. Later, as more and more malignant superpowered individuals like us appeared, it was transformed into a dedicated prison. The drainage system here was also repurposed from the original drainage channels used for maritime experiments, so no matter how many bodies are flushed down, it won't get clogged. Instead, they flow straight into the ocean with the current, flowing into the ocean." Qingyu murmured, then asked again, "If that's the case, hasn't anyone tried to escape through the sewer all these years?" "How would you escape through the sewer? Shrink your body to fit through such a small opening and flush yourself down?" The one-eyed man scoffed. "If you're talking about digging through the walls or floor with a spoon like in the movies, I suggest you give up on that idea. The floors and walls here are made of special metal. Even if you had a military knife, you couldn't break through in decades. This was originally a military base? How do you know that? That's common knowledge among the inmates here. It has been passed down for many years. I see. And Qingyu nodded, then asked his final question. You can ask. Even though the opening is large, certain bones in the human body can't pass through, like the pelvis, spine, and ribs. If there are no tools to break these bones, it shouldn't be possible to flush down, right? The one-eyed man's expression turned strange. He walked to the corner of the restroom, pried up the innermost floor tile, revealing several sharp tools like axes, hammers, and chisels underneath, all caked with dried blood, their age and usage unknown. And Qingyu's eyes showed a knowing expression as he nodded in satisfaction. All right, I have no more questions. The one-eyed man's lips curled into a smirk as he approached Qingyu, grabbing his face with one hand and roughly manhandling it while unbuckling his belt with the other. Kid, if you serve me well this time, I'll introduce you to some big brothers later, got it? Yeah, got it. And Qingyu gently raised his right hand, and suddenly, a thread of invisible silk burst forth from between his fingers, piercing through the one-eyed man's neck in an instant. Blood splattered onto the transparent lens, leaving a streak of crimson. And Qingyu lifted his delicate face, calmly gazing at the one-eyed man's expression of terror and confusion. Thank you for answering my questions. I will cooperate with you well. And Qingyu lightly flicked his finger, and the invisible silk seemed to come alive, swiftly slicing through the one-eyed man's corpse. The fasting facility can suppress forbidden items, but some forbidden objects can still maintain their original properties. This is why all inmates must undergo thorough searches before entering the fasting facility. However, Qingyu had allowed the mysterious silk to enter his body in advance, avoiding the search process. Now he was the only one in this fasting facility possessing a forbidden item. 10 minutes later, Qingyu pushed the restroom door open, shaking off the droplets of water from his hands and glasses, and walked out calmly. The restroom was now completely empty. Cafeteria. Lin Chia walked up to the serving counter, collected his own lunchbox, and casually found a spot nearby to sit down and eat. The prison cafeteria was much better than Lin Chia had imagined. Not only was it spacious enough to accommodate 300 to 400 people dining at the same time, but the food also tasted quite decent. At this moment, there were only a little over 100 inmates dining in the cafeteria, with most tables empty. The corner where Lin Chia sat was completely devoid of anyone. Just as Lin Chia was focused on his meal, Boss Han walked past him with a tray, casually tossing a small bag onto his table with a cold sneer before continuing on. Lin Chia frowned slightly as he opened the small bag on the table. Inside was half a bloody heart and a torn piece of clothing. The fragment had a string of numbers written on it. 04389. Lin Chia's expression gradually darkened. He remembered that string of numbers. It was the same number on the chest of Meng, whom he had beaten down yesterday. The presence of this torn piece and half a heart together made the meaning very clear. This was a demonstration, a warning. Meng, who had almost exposed Boss Han yesterday, was now dead. This indicated that Boss Han's influence was substantial enough to silently eliminate someone in this fasting facility. If he could kill Meng, he could certainly kill Lin Chia. This was the consequence of opposing him. At that moment, two figures carrying trays sat down beside Lin Chia. One of them noticed the bag on the table, frowned, and tossed it into the nearby trash can. These were the two who had helped Lin Chia out yesterday. I'm Wang Lu, former night watchman of Team 076 stationed in Guiyang City. Fang Yonghui, former night watchman of Team 021 stationed in Chuanxiang City. Lin Chia was taken aback, then replied, I'm Lin Chia, former night watchman of Team 136 stationed in Songnan City. Songnan City? Wang Lu's eyes widened in surprise. You're one of the night watchmen from that city that disappeared a year ago? That's right. Lin Chia nodded. Thanks to both of you for yesterday. Fang Yonghui waved his hand. We're all night watchmen, there's no need to be polite. Besides, you're just a young lad. We couldn't just stand by. Lin Chia felt a warmth in his heart, surprised to find a sense of camaraderie among night watchmen in this place. Boss Han's influence is considerable, but you don't need to fear him in this fasting facility. If he really tries to harm you and we're not around, just run outside. Wang Lu said. Outside. Yes, the activity area. There are snipers around the activity area, and even Boss Han wouldn't dare to gather people there to cause trouble. But in some indoor areas with weaker surveillance, that's not guaranteed. You must be careful. Wang Lu earnestly advised. Chapter 290. The Town Ruins Steal. It seems that the water in this prison is deeper than I imagined. Lin Chia nodded. Under the influence of the Town Ruins Monument, all realms and forbidden sequences lost their meaning. No matter how high the sequence, they could only be confined within the body. Only a few types of forbidden ruins that could alter physical strength still had some effect, providing extraordinary combat power like that Boss Han. Feng Yonghui said. Wang Lu nodded in agreement, saying that before entering the fasting facility he was merely a physical enhancement type forbidden ruin owner at the Sea Realm. In this prison there were indeed prisoners at the infinite or even Klein level. Any one of them could easily crush him. But here, combat power had been reshuffled. The Town Ruins Monument. Lin Chia murmured this name. Is this the forbidden object that suppresses everyone? That's right. Wang Lu said that the Town Ruins Monument is made from an extremely rare black stone, possessing the power to suppress all forbidden ruins. The strength of the suppression is related to the size of the stone. To suppress forbidden ruins below the river realm, a piece the size of a basketball is sufficient, but to suppress Klein-level forbidden ruins, it must be at least 8 or 9 meters tall. Lin Chia nodded, thinking that the Town Ruins Monument suppressing everyone in the training camp was probably about the size of a basketball, far from the one in the fasting facility. Otherwise, it would be impossible to suppress so many prisoners at once. 8 or 9 meters tall. With such a large target, aren't they afraid something might happen to the Town Ruins Monument? Lin Chia asked again. If the Town Ruins Monument that suppresses everyone's forbidden ruins were to disappear, who could control so many prisoners? Wang Lu and Feng Yonghui exchanged glances, both smiling. It's not that easy. Do you know where the Town Ruins Monument is? Wang Lu asked. Lin Chia shook his head, indicating he didn't know. Not knowing is correct. Besides the warden who oversees this prison, no one knows the location of the Town Ruins Monument. Wang Lu chuckled. A black stone monument 8 or 9 meters tall should be quite obvious, right? But even if you turn the entire fasting facility upside down, you wouldn't find a trace of the Town Ruins Monument. If we can't even find out where the Town Ruins Monument is, how can we talk about accidents? Lin Chia was left speechless. Moreover, even if something were to happen to the Town Ruins Monument, no prisoner would be able to walk out of this prison alive. Feng Yonghui continued. Why? Do you know who the warden of this prison is? Feng Yonghui said mysteriously. Lin Chia shook his head. It's Master Chen, one of the 5 human sealings. Feng Yonghui's lips curled slightly. Even if the Town Ruins Monument were to fail, all the prisoners here combined wouldn't be able to defeat him. What could possibly happen? Lin Chia. The image of the old man who had chatted and shared tea with him resurfaced in Lin Chia's mind. He hadn't expected that, besides being a human sealing, Master Chen was also the warden of the fasting facility. With him in charge, unless several deities came in person, it was indeed impossible for this place to fall. Lin Chia sighed deeply. With Master Chen here, the difficulty of his escape had increased significantly. Not to mention that his forbidden ruins had been suppressed. Even if they were released, escaping under the watch of a human sealing would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Could it be that he really had to wait until the year was up to leave this place? However, Master Chen was naturally laid back and carefree. Although he was the warden here, he wouldn't always be present. After all, with the Town Ruins Monument in place, it made little difference whether he was there or not. Feng Yonghui added. After finishing lunch, Lin Chia glanced at the time and bid farewell to the two, heading to the activity area to begin training. He hadn't completed yesterday's training tasks before being interrupted by Brother Ameng, but fortunately, today Boss Han and the others didn't show up for some reason, allowing Lin Chia to enjoy some peace. After completing 9 sets of pull-ups, Lin Chia picked up a stone nearby, strapped it to his back for added weight, and started running around the sports field. The scorching sun blazed. The midday sun hung high overhead, and the hot air felt as if it could ignite his lungs. The blistering sun scorched the earth, and during this time, there were very few prisoners still exercising in the open-air activity area. The vast majority of prisoners chose to chat and eat in the cafeteria or relax in the reading room. It must be said that the activities in the prison were quite diverse. In the empty outdoor activity area, there was only one boy in a blue and white striped patient uniform, staggering under the weight but gritting his teeth and continuing to run forward. Sweat streamed down his cheeks, dripping into the ground below. His patient uniform was already soaked, yet he showed no signs of stopping. Wang Lu and Fong Yonghui sat in the shadows of a corner, casually plucking a blade of grass to chew on, watching Lin Chia run desperately under the blazing sun, their eyes filled with emotion. Young people really have vitality. It reminds me of the days in the training camp back then. Fong Yonghui shot him a glance, disbelief written all over his face. Did you really work that hard back then? Wang Lu turned his head to look at the empty outdoor activity area, changing the subject. However, it's surprising that Boss Han's group didn't come to trouble Lin Chia today. It seems we were overthinking it. It's not that they don't want to cause trouble, they just don't have the time. Fong Yonghui shrugged. I just heard that Boss Han's one-eyed man has gone missing and they are looking for him. Missing? Killed secretly? I don't know, but it's quite possible. Fong Yonghui's gaze swept around, speaking lightly. This isn't just any place, it's the fasting facility. A living person just disappearing like that can only mean one thing. To be able to kill someone without Boss Han's knowledge is indeed impressive. I didn't expect that among these prisoners, there would be such ruthless individuals. Curiosity flickered in Wang Lu's eyes. The tools in the restroom on the first floor have been tampered with? After hearing the report from the scar-faced man, Boss Han's brows furrowed slightly. That's right, and there are fresh bloodstains on them. It seems that the scar-faced man's expression was somewhat hesitant. Boss Han's face darkened, his gaze sweeping across the cafeteria, revealing a sinister look. Anyone who dares to touch me is truly seeking death. Boss Han took a deep breath, suppressing the anger within him. Has the one-eyed man provoked anyone recently? As far as I know, it seems not. The scar-faced man pondered for a moment. However, the guy next to him said he had his eye on a new boy who came in this morning, and he heard he looked quite clean. Boy. Boss Han's eyes narrowed slightly. Chapter 291. The Mentally Ill. Boss, don't you think it's him? Scarface asked ominously. That's nonsense. Boss Han shot him a glare. Have you lost your mind? A new kid who just arrived this morning could quietly take out the one-eyed man right under my nose? And how could he possibly know our methods for killing and where we hide our tools? Scarface immediately lowered his head. It must be someone who's been in the retreat for a long time, someone cunning and ruthless. Maybe he's among us. Boss Han said firmly. Scarface was taken aback. Boss, are you saying there's a mole among us? That he killed the one-eyed man? Boss Han's gaze swept over the familiar figures in the cafeteria, and after a moment, a cold smile appeared on his lips. Whoever it is, if they dare to oppose me, there's only one way out for them. Meanwhile, on the other side of the cafeteria, Qingyu reached out to take a tray from the serving window, politely said thank you and turned to walk toward a corner of the cafeteria. As he walked, his peripheral vision took in the entire layout of the cafeteria, and when he reached the edge table he slowly sat down. He looked down at the half-piece of fish on his plate and sighed helplessly. I hate eating fish the most. In the outdoor activity area, Lin Chia dropped the heavy load from his back and staggered to the ground, gasping for breath. Today he had completed his training task satisfactorily. After the intense training, he felt every muscle in his body was sore, as if he were completely drained. This was the method taught by the instructors in the training camp. Although it was painful, the results were evident. As long as he continued to persevere, returning to peak physical condition wouldn't be difficult. Lin Chia looked up at the large clock hanging at the top of the prison. The time to return to the hospital was approaching. He struggled to stand up and walked heavily toward the hospital. About half a minute after he left, Qingyu's figure slowly emerged from the cafeteria. He scanned the empty activity area, shook his head in regret, turned and walked toward the cell, murmuring to himself. Where could he be? As Lin Chia reached the transparent door, he saw a figure in the same patient uniform squatting in the corner, intently looking at something with his head down. It was the other patient he had brushed past yesterday, Wu Laogo. After hesitating for a moment, Lin Chia stepped over to his side, squatted down and carefully observed the ground, which was so clean that not even an ant was present. What are you looking at? Lin Chia couldn't help but ask. Shoo! Wu Laogo, with his messy hair, earnestly made a shushing gesture to Lin Chia. Lower your voice, don't wake him up. Lin Chia lowered his voice and asked, Wake up who? Little Flower. Lin Chia was taken aback, looked down again at the empty ground for a moment and frowned slightly. He wanted to say that there were no flowers here, but he kept his mouth shut. After all, he was the attending physician for 3 psychiatric patients, and he understood a bit about how to communicate with them. After a long while, seeing Lin Chia staring at the ground without moving, Wu Laogo couldn't help but ask quietly, What are you looking at? I'm looking at Little Flower too. Lin Chia replied, still focused on the ground. But Little Flower is already dead. Lin Chia's mouth twitched slightly. He raised his head and asked, When did Little Flower die? How come I didn't see it? Just now. Wu Laogo looked at him as if to say, Didn't you see? Then what are you looking at now? I'm looking at Little Potato. Lin Chia. Lin Chia gave up on the idea of communicating with Wu Laogo, stood up, and at that moment the transparent door slowly opened. A caregiver stood behind the door and waved at Lin Chia. Lin Chia stepped inside, and another caregiver poked their head out from behind the door, calling out to Wu Laogo, who was still staring blankly at the ground. Wu Laogo, time to go home. Wu Laogo looked up and made a shushing gesture to the caregiver. Shoo. Little Grass is still sleeping. Keep it down. The caregiver's mouth twitched and a helpless expression appeared on their face as they walked over to Wu Laogo and pulled him back. As Wu Laogo was dragged away, he kept his eyes fixed on that empty spot. Lin Chia withdrew his gaze and walked deeper into the hospital with the caregiver. What kind of illness does Wu Laogo have? Lin Chia asked. Psychiatric illness. I know it's a psychiatric illness, but what specifically? I'm not sure either. The caregiver shook their head. Wu Laogo's case is directly handled by Dr. Li. No one knows exactly what illness he has except for him. All right. Lin Chia followed the caregiver back to his metal room, closed the door behind him, took a quick shower in the simple bathroom, and then lay back on the bed, starting to digest the observations he made throughout the day, constantly simulating possible escape routes. After struggling for a long time without any results, Lin Chia sank his consciousness into the mental world. The psychiatric hospital of the gods. Gu 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 jie. As soon as Lin Chia entered the courtyard, a pug dashed past him, barking nonsensically. However, this harsh barking could only serve as background noise at that moment, as a more malicious voice swirled in the air. Ah! Nothing is as beautiful as spring. The swaying grass grows tall, beautiful and lush. The thrush's eggs are like a low sky. The thrush's song cleanses the ears through the echoing woods. On the roof of the hospital, a handsome figure with golden hair was caressing a harp, gazing affectionately at the beautiful scenery in the courtyard, singing loudly. Gu 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 jie. The pug ran around frantically. No matter where it hid, that voice would echo in its ears. Finally, it gritted its teeth and crashed straight into the wall in front of it, landing on its back and fainting. Lin Chia's mouth twitched wildly. As he turned his head, he saw Li Yifei and Azhu sitting nearby with cotton stuffed in their ears, their faces pale and looking utterly disheartened. Lin Chia walked over, ready to speak, when he suddenly realized something and asked, Where's Hong Yen? Li Yifei pointed to the rooftop. Lin Chia looked up and saw a red-haired figure suddenly appear behind the entranced Bragi, decisively kicking him off the roof. Chapter 292, She and Him. Red Face, what you did is wrong. Where is this place? This is a hospital. Who's Bragi? He's a patient here. Patients are a group that needs our help and care. Although he has mental issues, kicking him down from the 3rd floor with your foot is simply wrong. If you have objections to some of the patient's behaviors, you can choose a more tactful way to handle it, like silencing him, sewing his mouth shut, or even cutting out his vocal cords directly. Today's incident is very serious. I punish you to eat 2 more chicken legs tonight. Next time you encounter such a situation, I hope you can remain rational and not do anything that damages our hospital's image. Do you understand? Lin Chia stood there with a serious expression, loudly reprimanding the red face in front of him. Red Face tilted her head in confusion, seemingly pondering whether she was being punished or rewarded. Whatever, no matter what Lin Chia said, as long as she nodded, it was right. In Li Yifei's words, this is called corporatization? Not far away, Bragi was holding his butt, looking indignant. Too much. This is too much. You know nothing about the beauty of poetry. Lin Chia quickly stepped forward and sincerely said, Mr. Bragi, this time our hospital was wrong. I have already punished her severely. Please don't be angry. At that moment, the tightly closed ward door opened, and Nikes came out with knitting needles and thread, looking a bit surprised as he said, why isn't he singing anymore? I just found the needles and thread to sew his mouth shut. Bragi. Lin Chia cleared his throat twice and gave Li Yifei a glance. The latter immediately understood and loudly said, dinner is ready, everyone get ready to eat. Everyone gathered around the dining table, chatting and laughing. Nikes gently asked Bragi if he was hurt and how serious the injury was, as if forgetting who had just held the needles and thread to sew Bragi's mouth. Lin Chia watched this scene before him and sighed helplessly. From the outside world's mental hospital to the inside, it seemed that there was no longer any normalcy in his world. He worried that if this continued, he would soon be assimilated by the mental patients. As night deepened, Lin Chia slowly walked to the courtyard, looking up at the second-floor ward. The 3 patients had already settled down and the entire floor was pitch black. He wasn't in a hurry, he just leaned against a tree trunk and closed his eyes to rest. Tonight he would meet the woman within Bragi. After a long while, Lin Chia suddenly opened his eyes and looked up at the second floor. He saw that the originally dark floor had somehow lit up with a faint glow, and the source of the light was the gap in Bragi's broken door. Lin Chia knew it was time. He quietly climbed the stairs, walked to the door of room 3, held his breath and carefully peered through the gap. In the dim candlelight, Bragi had changed into that white silk gown, elegantly sitting in front of a bronze mirror, gently twirling a strand of hair by his ear, as if admiring his own appearance. After a while, as if he had admired enough, he reached into a box and took a dab of deep red, gently applying it to his lips. Who are you? Suddenly, a voice came from the doorway. Bragi's body jolted and he turned his head sharply to see Lin Chia standing at the door, panic evident on his face. Wait. Lin Chia stepped forward to stand in front of Bragi, looking into those flustered eyes and calmly said, You are not Bragi. Who are you? Bragi's lips pressed together slightly, lowering his head and not daring to meet Lin Chia's gaze. His hands were tightly clasped in front of him, like a child who knew he had made a mistake. I am Eden. His voice trembled slightly. Eden. Lin Chia was taken aback upon hearing the name. That name seemed somewhat familiar. He seemed to have thought of something, looking into Bragi's eyes, his own filled with shock. You are Bragi's wife, the goddess of youth, Eden? Bragi. No, it should be said. Eden nodded. Lin Chia looked again at the panel behind Bragi. The content on the panel had already changed. Room 3. Patient, Bragi Eden. Task, help Bragi Eden treat his mental illness. When the treatment progress reaches the specified values, 1%, 50%, 100%, a portion of Bragi's Eden's abilities can be randomly drawn. Current treatment progress, 0%. Lin Chia gasped. The panel provided by the Divine Mental Hospital had changed, which meant that the woman before him was definitely not a figment of Bragi's imagination or a split personality, but a real deity. In other words, Bragi's body actually housed the souls of 2 deities. You are Bragi's wife. Why do you share a body with him? What is going on? Lin Chia asked in confusion. Eden lowered her head even further. I don't know. A century ago, a mysterious fog invaded Asgard from who knows where, and the weaker deities began to die one after another, while the powers of the stronger deities rapidly declined, about to vanish from this world. Later, some powerful evil gods began to slaughter their followers to protect themselves, sacrificing souls to preserve their existence. Some benevolent gods, unwilling to do so, came to me wanting me to give them each an apple. Is it the golden apple from mythology that can keep deities eternally youthful? Lin Chia asked. Yes. In Norse mythology, the goddess of youth, Eden, possessed many golden apples that could grant eternal youth, and it was not surprising that they could help the gods resist the invasion of the fog when it descended. Did you give them? I did. A bitter expression appeared on Eden's face. I gave them all the golden apples, leaving only 2, one for me and one for Bragi. But I underestimated the power of the fog. Neither Bragi nor I are particularly powerful deities. I, with the authority over youth, could barely resist the fog with my strong vitality, but Bragi could not. Lin Chia's brows furrowed slightly. As the divine power gradually weakened, Bragi fell into a coma, and I could only stand by his side feeling helpless. Eden seemed to recall something, her eyes reddening, tears welling up. But he still survived. Lin Chia slowly spoke. So what did you do? Eden raised her head, looking at the familiar and warm face in the mirror. One hand gently placed over her right chest, her eyes filled with deep affection, and the corners of her mouth slightly lifted. I gave him my heart. Chapter 293, The Poet of the Sky. Lin Chia stared at Eden for a long time and let out a long sigh. He finally understood where Bragi's problem lay. Eden had given Bragi the heart that belonged to the goddess of youth, and under the influence of the mist, inadvertently merged her own soul into Bragi's body. This resulted in the current situation of two souls in one body. His situation was somewhat similar to Merlin's, but fundamentally different. Merlin had stumbled into a mysterious world while exploring the real world, where his mind was invaded by pink starfish, and the control over the body was uncontrollable, representing an external soul invasion. In contrast, Bragi and Eden were a case of two souls in one body. Bragi's body still pulsed with Eden's heart, and Eden's soul lay hidden within it. She would only emerge when Bragi fell asleep, and there was no hostility between them, forming a symbiotic relationship. Lin Chia could certainly use the method he employed against Merlin to directly extract Eden's soul from Bragi's body, but doing so would inevitably lead to Eden's soul being shattered. Moreover, on the panel, Eden was also part of the patient, so this approach would definitely not meet the treatment criteria. Given this, how should he treat Bragi and Eden? By the way, did Bragi know about this? Lin Chia pointed to the heart on Bragi's right side. Eden shook her head. He didn't know. When I gave him my heart, he was already unconscious, and I only came out after he fell asleep. After I was done, I would restore everything to its original state. He had no awareness of my existence. Why not tell him? Eden looked up at the familiar face in the mirror, a bitter smile appearing on her face as she shook her head. If he knew the truth, he would go mad. I don't want him to live forever in the shadow of guilt. A man as sunny and gentle as he is shouldn't have to live like that. Eden gazed into Lin Chia's eyes, her eyes filled with pleading. Director, I ask you, please don't tell him about this. I won't affect his life. If you require it, I can stop appearing from now on. I just want to quietly watch over him. Lin Chia looked at Eden's reddened eyes and after a moment of hesitation nodded. Rest assured, I won't reveal your existence. You don't need to disappear. Every night when Bragi falls asleep, you can still come out for a stroll, but you must be careful not to let anyone discover your presence, especially that caregiver named Li Yifei. Lin Chia earnestly reminded her. Currently, Li Yifei still thought that Bragi was simply suffering from schizophrenia or sleepwalking. If he learned of Eden's existence, he might excitedly rush to Bragi the next day, mysteriously saying, I have a secret to tell you. Lin Chia agreed to keep Eden's existence a secret from Bragi not only because of Eden's request but also for Bragi's mental state. If Bragi were to find out that he was alive because his wife sacrificed her heart, it would surely cause psychological issues, and it wouldn't be impossible for him to become the second Nyx. Lin Chia certainly did not want to see the treatment progress turn negative. However, how to treat the situation between Bragi and Eden was something Lin Chia still needed to think through carefully. At that moment, the familiar panel reappeared before Lin Chia's eyes. Bragi Eden, treatment progress, 1%. Reward extraction conditions met, beginning random extraction of Bragi Eden, S divine abilities. Lin Chia was taken aback, a look of surprise appearing in his eyes. He hadn't expected that simply agreeing to Eden's request would advance the treatment progress by 1%. Upon reflection, it wasn't surprising. For so many years, Eden had quietly hidden within Bragi's body. Objectively speaking, she was also an invader, a wandering soul occupying Bragi's body at night. But the moment Lin Chia agreed to her request, she transformed from an outsider into a patient in need of treatment. In simple terms, she received recognition from Lin Chia. A simple change in mindset could also impact Eden's mental state. Lin Chia carefully observed the spinning wheel before him, his eyes filled with astonishment. Unlike the previous ability extraction wheel, this one was significantly larger and divided into golden and red sections, with the number of abilities doubled. The golden area contained abilities all derived from the god of poetry, Bragi, including Divine Sound of the Blessed, Essence of Art, End Times Bard, Poem of Destruction, Super Handsome and Soul Control Melody. The red section, on the other hand, was entirely sourced from the goddess of youth, Eden, including Heart of Youth, Eternal Secret Garden, Undying Body, Minor Wish Spell, and All Things Have Spirit. The densely packed ability will almost dazzled Lin Chia's eyes. Although it contained some strange abilities, he was getting used to it. Lin Chia felt a slight regret. He had hoped that the two deities in room 3 might allow for 2 consecutive spins on different wheels, but it seemed he was overthinking it. Taking a deep breath, Lin Chia chose to start spinning the wheel, and the 2-colored wheel began to spin rapidly in a dazzling manner. Lin Chia's gaze was fixed on the wheel, his heart racing. As the 2-colored wheel gradually came to a stop, the pointer finally landed on a golden area. Sky Poet. Sky Poet? Lin Chia looked at the name, a look of confusion appearing on his face. What kind of ability is this? Lin Chia reached out, and the floating character transformed into a white light that surged into his body. The next moment, several lines of small text appeared before his eyes. Sky Poet. Poetry has a spirit. Whenever you recite a line of poetry that resonates with your heart, you can create corresponding effects on the surrounding environment. The stronger the resonance between the poetry and your heart, the greater the impact on the external world. Lin Chia carefully read each word, standing there in a daze. What does this mean? Is it a poetic version of "Speak and it shall be"? Lin Chia temporarily suppressed his confusion and, after bidding farewell to Eden, returned to the dark and empty courtyard. Just as he was about to speak, he froze in place. Reciting poetry, but he knew nothing about foreign poetry. They hadn't taught it in school, and it certainly wouldn't be covered in training camps. Did he really have to go buy a book of foreign poetry and study it? He also wondered if this foreign god's ability could be applied to poetry from Daxia. After pondering for a moment, Lin Chia decided to give it a try. He cleared his throat and spoke loudly. Flowing down 3,000 feet. It seems like the Milky Way is falling. Splash. Just as he reached halfway through, a glimmer of light flashed from Lin Chia's eyes. His voice seemed to carry a unique charm, and the next moment, a massive torrent of water came crashing down from the sky. Chapter 294. A waterfall plunging 3,000 feet. Cough, 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 cough. Lin Chia, drenched from head to toe, lowered his head and began to cough violently. The sudden appearance of that stream of water had nearly flooded his lungs. After coughing for a long time, Lin Chia finally managed to catch his breath. He looked at his soaked self and the large puddle on the ground, falling into silence. The good news was that this ability was equally effective against the poetry of the great Xia. The bad news was, this thing seemed to be indiscriminate. In other words, Lin Chia could indeed influence his surroundings through poetry, but he couldn't perfectly control the effect itself. He wasn't sure if it was due to his lack of skill or if this ability was inherently troublesome. Another point was that the strength of this ability didn't seem very high. Lin Chia was already a powerful figure in the Chuanjing realm, and the Sky Poet could be considered a divine power. Yet when combined, it only summoned this small amount of water. From the size of the puddle on the ground, the volume of the water that had just appeared was only about the size of a bucket. Could it be that his resonance with poetry wasn't strong enough? But how could he enhance his resonance with poetry? Lin Chia pondered for a moment and slowly closed his eyes in the darkness. In his mind, he began to envision a waterfall, a magnificent waterfall hanging high in the sky. Rushing water roared down from the clouds, like a white ribbon dropped by a deity, stretching for miles with no end in sight. The roaring sound of the water was like thunder rolling in the sky, filling his mind. At this moment he stood before this waterfall, feeling every droplet of water splashing against him. Perhaps this waterfall truly existed. In the psychiatric hospital of the gods. Water trickled down the wet edges of his clothes, softly dripping onto the ground, echoing in the quiet courtyard. Lin Chia stood like a stone statue, motionless. He didn't know how long it had been when his tightly shut eyes trembled slightly, and his lips parted as he murmured. Flying down 3,000 feet it seems. Boom, boom, boom. A thunderous sound suddenly erupted, startling Li Yifei awake from his sleep. He sat up in bed, dazed for a moment, then quickly jumped out of bed. Beside him, Zhu rubbed her sleepy eyes and asked in confusion, "Fei Gu, what is that sound?" Li Yifei casually threw on a nurse's uniform, turning the doorknob as he said, "I don't know, I'm going to." Boom. As soon as the door was opened a crack, a torrent of water surged in, crashing the door open and slamming Li Yifei against the wall. Zhu was taken aback, and the next moment the rushing water swept her out of the room. Ah 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 ah. Glug glug glug. Ah ah ah. Glug glug glug. Accompanied by Zhu's intermittent screams, the entire psychiatric hospital was thrown into chaos. The first-floor courtyard was completely submerged, and water rushed into the kitchen, sweeping away the utensils inside. Crash crash crash. The turbulent white waves rolled violently, carrying flowers, branches, cutting boards, Zhu and a pug barking in confusion, all tossed about by the water. Scatter. A deep voice came from the second floor. Mei Lin, draped in a hospital gown and holding a magic wand, had the tip of the wand glowing with blue light. The swirling magical aura made Mei Lin's hospital gown flutter. In the next moment, the water filling the courtyard began to rise automatically, guided by the tip of Mei Lin's wand, and coalesced into an enormous water sphere suspended in the air. Mei Lin waved his hand again and a spatial rift opened, swallowing the entire water sphere, making it disappear without a trace. Oh no. As the water in the courtyard vanished, Zhu fell to the ground with a thud, surrounded by scattered cutting boards and branches. He covered his backside, wincing in pain. On the other side, Lin Chia, who had been slammed against the wall by the water, let out a muffled groan and kept spitting out water. After a long while he finally stood up, wearing a look of despair. Mei Lin walked over and asked in confusion, "What happened? Where did all this water come from?" Lin Chia's mouth twitched slightly. "It's nothing, just a little accident." He truly hadn't expected the power of reciting poetry to be this great. Even though Lin Chia hadn't finished reciting, he had summoned so much water that it was as if he had diverted a section of the river and poured it all in. In just 1 second, the water had filled the entire first floor, submerging the male nurse's dormitory, kitchen, courtyard, and laundry room. If Lin Chia had completed the recitation, he might have really summoned a waterfall. However, having only recited half a line, Lin Chia's mental energy had already been depleted by nearly 2/3. With his current level, he wasn't capable of achieving that. Lin Chia checked the hospital again, confirming that aside from the kitchen utensils being soaked, the courtyard was in disarray and Zhu's backside was swollen. There were no other losses. He finally breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't linger in the hospital but directly returned his consciousness to his body, sitting up in bed. He needed to experiment with what the Sky Poet could achieve under the suppression of the town ruins monument, as this would directly relate to his escape plan. He glanced at the camera in the corner of the room and walked straight into the bathroom, shutting the door behind him. After all, he was just a patient, not a prisoner, so the research facility hadn't gone so far as to install a camera in his bathroom. Perhaps this was his last bit of defiance. Lin Chia stood by the sink, slowly closed his eyes and began to recite again. Flying down 3,000 feet, it seems like the Milky Way falling from the heavens. Splash splash splash. The sound of rushing water suddenly filled the quiet bathroom. Lin Chia opened his eyes and was momentarily stunned by the scene before him. He had indeed summoned water, but unlike before, this time the water was coming from the faucet. Water flowing from the faucet seemed reasonable, but the problem was that Lin Chia hadn't even turned it on. Suddenly, Lin Chia seemed to have thought of something. He took 2 steps back and recited again. Wildfires cannot be extinguished. Spring winds blow and they grow again. Sizzle. A small flame sprang up from his fingertips, quietly dancing in front of him. The flame was not large, even smaller than a lighter's flame, barely enough to light a cigarette. Compared to the rushing water from the faucet, this small flame seemed rather insignificant. Lin Chia extinguished the flame with a wave of his hand, a look of realization dawning on his face. He had finally understood what this ability was all about.